Welcome, everyone. I'm Brenda Munyufi, the VP of Operations here at Raven, and I'll be your host today. Thanks for joining us for our webinar panel, How DuraVent Transitioned from Reactive to Proactive Shop Floor Improvements. I'm really excited for today's session, and we'll introduce you to our panelists in just a moment. But before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items with you. This webinar will be recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent to you via email later today. Lindsay and Marisha from our marketing team are also online for any technical support. So if you have any questions or issues throughout the session, please feel free to use the chat option to message them directly, and they'll certainly be able to help you out. And lastly, would love for you guys to join in on the conversation today. If you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box. You can access the Q&A box in the menu bar at the bottom of the screen. We've also set aside time for the Q&A at the end of the webinar to answer them. So quick recap for us, a lot of questions on what does Raven do? For those of you that are not familiar with Raven, we work with manufacturers in two key ways. We help them account for 100% of production time and losses. And two, we encourage operators and make it easy for them to provide meaningful human context that enables confident, fact-driven productivity improvements on the shop floor. So without further ado, I will introduce Mike Gardner and give him an opportunity to tell us a little bit about himself. And shortly after that, Dr. Paul Turner, if you want to go next.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brenda. So my name is Mike Gardner. I am the production manager at DuraVent out of our California facility. And a little bit of background about DuraVent is we are a leading manufacturer in heating and ventilation product. A lot of our product we sell to customers such as Home Depot, Lowe's, Tractor Supply. We do both wholesale and retail. The company has actually been around since about the 50s, and we recently just went from 3 facilities to 9. We did a major acquisition with Hurt and Cooley. So we are now definitely by volume the leader of the market when it comes to production for HVAC and ventilation. So that's a little bit about the company and myself, and I've been working with Raven for the better part of about 1.5 years now.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Paul Turner, Chief Operating Officer at Raven. I joined Raven in February. Previous to that, I was with Stanley Black & Decker as Vice President of Industry 4 for data analytics. Been in manufacturing for 30 years. Very much focused on leveraging technology to drive productivity improvements, and over the past 10 years been specifically focused on digital transformation and Industry 4.
Fantastic, thanks, Paul. And I'll quickly highlight a little bit of my experience as well as being as VP of Operations here at Raven. I think the expertise that I bring to our organization is a vast majority of my own experiences of 16 years. Has been in manufacturing as well. So certainly I think you'll see the recurring theme that we're very passionate about gaining visibility of machines, value streams, and making sure working with our customers, we're putting our passion for continuous improvement and driving ROI through people, process, and tools. So for today's discussion topics, DuraVent Mike will give us a quick overview of DuraVent and their approach to continuous improvement. Our first theme for today is going to be a discussion from manual processes to digitization. And the second theme is prioritizing people, process, and technology. And the third theme for today is the frontline ownership and empowerment. And the last theme we'll conclude with is the reactive to proactive continuous improvement. And then we'll jump right into our live Q&A, and looking forward to you guys participating as well. So Mike, I will hand it over to you to give us a little bit of an introduction about how DuraVent is taking the CI approach.
Absolutely, thank you very much. So our approach to CI initially was very, very traditional. It was a top-down approach. We had a change in senior and executive management, and they were formerly automotive industry, and CI was very, very important to them. So from the top down, the approach was, we want CI and make it happen. So very, very fortunate that we had the support of upper management. We were actually able to retain some former Toyota employees to begin our deployment. We started CI in about 2015. I had our legs a little wobbly till about 2016 when we were able to fully deploy and implement our CI initiatives. And really the change in the approach was from the top down, and we changed it to the bottom up. So we went to the source, we went to where the magic happens, if you will, on the floor. We went to the operators and began trying to engage them, and they're the experts, right? They build the product, they're out there every day, they understand the small nuances of the machines and the product. So we decided, hey, let's reevaluate this. Let's go to the source and to the experts and figure out where are the improvements really, really needed. So once we pivoted and took that route, we began to really gain momentum and steam. And we saw a lot of improvements, and we essentially reached a point where we were tracking and logging a lot of data, but that sort of became cumbersome. And that's when we found Raven. And as they say, the rest is history.
Fantastic. No, it's a great story, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. So to kick things off, well, we do have an engagement poll for everyone. So if Marisha, if you could put that slide up. So quick question to the audience. How are you currently capturing downtime? If you guys could select a single choice, is it manual processes, whiteboards and spreadsheets? Do you have a digital solution? Is it a mix of manual and digital processes, or we aren't currently tracking downtime? We'll give it a few more minutes, and just for the audience as well, the panelists are not allowed to vote, so I guess we're not trusted to skew the results here. Okay, and the results are in. We have 40% are using manual processes, 10% digital solution, 40% a mix of both, and 10% that are currently tracking downtime. Did you guys, Mike and Paul, did you expect this mix?
So I predicted that the mix of manual and digital would be high. It's very interesting that just pure manual processes are taking up 40%. That I guess is not unexpected, but it's still I think knocks you back when you see it. Yeah, interesting results.
Awesome. So we'll jump into our first topic, which is from manual processes to digitization. So I think part of kind of Paul's comment to just get back into that. So despite extensive investment in technology over the years, many manufacturing teams are still depending on manual spreadsheets and emails and even phone calls. So I think that 40% really resonated with me, despite being in 2022 when digitization is such a big thing for manufacturers. And I also remember as a young engineer still doing data collection on paper in brand new plants that were supposed to digitize, right? So it's certainly an interesting theme. And Paul, I'm curious to hear about your thoughts on why there's a need to progress from data in spreadsheets to digitization.
Well, I think if we think about manual processes as being reactive to events rather than data-driven and proactive, then I think it's obvious that digitization can provide significant benefits. However, going digital in and of itself is not the end game. If the shop floor isn't executing a sound framework for continuous improvement, standard daily work, lean thinking, then if you just convert a poor manual process to digital, then you're just going to end up with a poor digital process. So ideally, that digital transformation process should not only provide data to operations to enable data-driven decisions, but also improve the overall process itself. So, for example, if we take a factory that has a problematic asset that suffers from periodic mechanical breakdowns and it loses many hours of lost production per week, if the response to that is such mechanical failures is reactive from the plant, then they may come away thinking that they have an asset reliability issue. However, through digitization, if you shine a light on the minute-by-minute timeline of why that asset is not producing, then another story can emerge. So let's say that when the machine goes down, there's a 30-minute delay before the maintenance teams are alerted and get to the asset to fix it. And then let's say the machine just takes 10 minutes to fix. And then after that, it takes another 30 minutes for an operator to actually start the machine again. Well, now that you have that granular data, what the data now tells us is that 1 hour of that downtime is actually due to operational process deficiencies and not asset reliability. So it changes the way that plants can actually look at a problem and tackle it. And the outcome of this is not only digitization providing insights into the hidden losses of downtime, but also providing those insights into the operational changes that can drive productivity improvement. So, Mike, I'm interested to know that your experience at DuraVent from going from manual spreadsheets to digital.
Yes, we faced a lot of challenges in that regard. So, initially when we deployed our CI program, we wanted to track everything. So we deployed these equipment productivity rate scoreboards, which were essentially our production standards, what we expected that we should produce, what we actually produced, reasons why we came up short, downtime, etc. And as you could see, it's a lot of information. And this is just one board at one line, and we had about 96 lines in our facility at that time. So it became very, very cumbersome. And we found ourselves in several interesting situations, one of which was reliability of this information. We wanted to make sure we had the right people with the right information filling this out, which of course meant it was a team lead or a production supervisor, in which case they were spending their time going line to line, manually inputting this information. Well, while they were doing that, they weren't leading their team. They weren't, overseeing their normal duties. So we really added a lot of administrative work for them. Something else that we found was the storage and retrieval of data in this process was very, very cumbersome and very, very time consuming. We'd have to go around and manually take photographs, input those into our system, take up a lot of space, take up a lot of time doing that. And more importantly, when we went to review that information, it was very, very time consuming to locate the right date, transfer this data into Excel or an email, et cetera, et cetera. So with that being said, going digitally, it improved everything drastically, both from a reliability and from a speed standpoint. We were able to get real-time data at any time. We didn't have to go searching through old files, anticipating and hoping we understood what it was named, where it was located, and really having a full-time employee dedicated to putting that all together and putting a bow on it. So now we have the ability to quickly pull that information.
That's fantastic, Mike. And I think you both and Paul kind of touched on some key areas, right? Because in a world constantly changed by a pandemic, supply chain and demand volatility, labor challenges, I think all of these combined are really ushering for a real need for the real-time visibility.
Absolutely.
Just one thing on this, Mike. So this isn't just about going digital and plugging a system into something that's gathering data from, say, machines, etc. There's also the gathering of data, the human context as well, from the operators that you're leveraging here as well. Is that right?
Absolutely correct. So in the photograph in front of us, we have one of our press machines, which is a very, very common machine, one of our most utilized machines. And you can see the green screen directly to his right is actually one of the Raven hublets, where previously past that, you can see a clipboard, and even further to the right is where we have the equipment productivity board. So that employee was having to physically walk away from their workstation, which is a waste and a potential safety concern, to input this data. Whereas now with that technology installed, the operator isn't having to put all that information. He's really limited what he's having to put in there because it's capturing that data in real time via the machine. But those limited times that the operator does need to input the information, it's within arm's reach. And he's not having to manually write out extensive notes. We have pre-programmed reasons built into the logic.
That's fantastic, because it's really, and I think a lot of people do forget the sustainability element and the health and safety issues as well, right? As key enhancements that can also happen from the technology. That's fantastic that you guys were able to do this.
Absolutely.
So leading into our next theme about prioritizing people, process, and technology. So to kick it off, I'll share a little bit of an experience where I will own up a little bit. I've worked on a number of digital transformation projects in my past life, and not all of them were successful. When you do the reflection points and your 5 whys to try and understand why, a major root cause was the prioritization of people, process, and tools. So a lot of my peers, we ended up coming with this theory of the 3-legged stool, right? So if anyone can even imagine sitting on a wobbly stool, it's really about how we prioritize those 3 elements into the continuous improvement process. but it goes beyond that, right? The sequence of prioritization is equally important. So Mike, I'm curious to hear how you've tackled the prioritization of people, process, and in this case, using Raven as the technology for DuraVent.
Sure, sure. So yes, but very, very well put. The three-legged approach. I wish I had that a couple of years ago to explain to my bosses the issues we were facing.
It doesn't get old though. It's yeah.
So really, initially we made some mistakes. I'll own up to it as well. We took the approach of technology is going to solve all of our problems, and we quickly realized that we have to prioritize people, processes, and technology, but do it in unison, right? And essentially, people are our most valuable asset. So really what we wanted to do was have the technology available and ready, but make sure that we had buy-in from the people. We didn't want the technology to become a burden and an additional process. We wanted it to be a tool that they could utilize for help. So understanding the needs of the people and how to incorporate the technology into the process is what really, really gave us success. And once we got the people on board, understanding that, hey, we're not asking you to just put information in to put it in a spreadsheet. We want the information to make your job easier. That really, really changed the tide for us.
That's fantastic. And Paul, I'm curious as well to kind of hear from your experiences in manufacturing as well, how you've tackled this.
Yeah, well, I'll take the three-legged stool analogy as well. So we definitely need a careful balance of people, process, and technology to be successful at digital transformation, particularly at scale. And for example, the plethora of new technologies that's evolved over the past decade, it's very easy to get seduced by the momentum, and it's a huge momentum that these tools are creating. However, any project that prioritizes technology over people and process is likely to end up having minimal closed loop impact on productivity. And I've got an example. It makes me smile. I don't know if it makes everybody else smile, but there was one project that I worked on where a highly proficient predictive analytics model for product quality was created using AI, machine learning, etc. And it was able to predict defects on a machine up to 40 minutes before that machine actually started manufacturing sub-quality products. So fantastic. However, when we look at the historical data and examine it, you could see that even when the machine actually started spitting out poor quality product, it still took 45 minutes for the maintenance teams to get to attend to the asset and fix the problem. So guess what happens post deployment of the model? Well, now it takes 85 minutes for the maintenance team from the first detection to actually get to resolving it. So technology itself is never going to sort of solve a lack of labor or a lack of a good process for dealing with these sorts of issues. Doesn't matter how powerful it is.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting because we all get excited at the shiny new tools, right? And like you say, technology can make or break your organization. And I think for me, it really is without the technology, people become exhausted and processes are inefficient and non-existent. And I think, Mike, you touched that with some of their photos that you shared with us there, right? But with the right technology, the frontline staff will be equipped to streamline their processes, take that ownership without being overwhelmed by to the drive as well. So very interesting discussion. And that leads us into our next key theme, which is frontline ownership and empowerment. So we'll run another poll just to get some audience engagement as well. So the poll is, what is or was your biggest barrier to frontline empowerment? So single choice again here. Was it lack real-time visibility into shift performance, not engaged with OEE improvement tools, missing key insights into the data metrics that matter to the frontline, time-consuming and distracting processes to track and monitor production? Mike, I'll put you on the spot. What do you think our audience is going to come back with as the top barrier here?
Ooh, I hate to say it, but I'm going to say not engaged.
Yeah, so we see that that's a common theme quite a bit. Or we think they're engaged, but we haven't really nailed the buy-in as well, right?
Correct, and that was our case.
Paul, you have any thoughts there?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I agree with Mike. That's the holy grail is getting the operations teams to engage with the tool, and often that's such a challenge because, sorry, are we biasing the result here by doing this? But yeah, particularly if it's a top-down approach, I'll tell you what, I'm going to park it. I'll talk about it in one of the next themes.
We're still waiting for the results to come in. I'm sure that's going to come in shortly. Okay. You nailed it, Mike. Not engaged with OEE tools is 38%, and we missing key insights and time consuming came in both at 25%, and then lacking real-time visibility was their fourth choice there for folks. Very interesting. And I think you touched on the buy-in as well there, Mike, where people engagement and buy-in is often a tough aspect of implementing technology. I think for me, that was always the toughest when it came to actually implementing some of these digitization or transformational projects, right? So Paul, what are your thoughts when it comes to the frontline ownership and empowerment?
Well, again, it doesn't matter how powerful the technology is or the solution. If the operations teams don't embrace it, then there's a significantly high chance of failure. And as I said earlier, operations teams, they don't like projects being done to them. They want to have that ownership. And indeed, ownership is necessary for engagement. So taking the example of getting operators to accurately label downtimes, that's been an intractable problem for decades. Now, most OEE MES systems will provide a user interface for operators to enter downtime reasons, but often the resultant data is inaccurate, incomplete, or at such a generic level that it doesn't serve any purpose. And the reason that that problem has been so intractable is that operators feel that it's a burden on them. They expect software to make their lives easier. They don't appreciate software that heaps a large number of new tasks on them that they perceive to have little value to them personally. So if an operator is looking after a dozen or more machines that are going down, 10, 12, 15 times a day, going in and labeling all those downtimes while they're busy doing other things, it's a recipe for disengagement, unless you can tackle it through both the design of the technology and the technology itself. So at Raven, we feel that there's really three dimensions to this to sort of really nail it. The first dimension is that if you do have to get the operator to enter a downtime, it has to be as easy as possible for them to do it. The operators often wearing gloves, greasy, oily environments. They're not going to be wanting to type away at a computer. So that's the first dimension. The second dimension is the automation. You really need to automate as much of the tagging as possible so that you relieve that burden from the operator. And the more that you can automate, and you can't automate everything, people, process, technology, you can't just do everything with technology. But if you can automate as much as you can, then at least then you're not asking the operator annoying questions. While they're busy trying to stabilize an asset after a changeover, the last thing an operator wants to be doing is tagging a downtime. Okay, but even those two dimensions, and again, three legs of the stool, I guess, again, even those two dimensions aren't going to nail it. The third dimension, which is important as well, is the operator needs to feel as though there's some utility in what they're doing, like a quid pro quo. So, I mean, there's many ways of doing that, but maybe a simple example is, let's say the asset runs out of raw material, and so the asset stops producing. Then the actual process of tagging the downtime, if that could send an alert to materials handling department, so then they can actually realize that there's a problem with the asset and go and provide new material, then that serves two purposes. One, it adds utility to the process of tagging, and then secondly, the big red screen that was saying this machine's down and it's the operator's fault, Now it's gone to a different color and now saying it's somebody else's fault. So that psychologically can engage the operator, because now they're getting their supervisors off the back, and nobody likes it more than saying, right, not my problem anymore, it's somebody else's. And it's things like that that drive ownership and empowerment in the solution. But it's a secret sauce. You need all aspects of that. So Mike, in DuraVent, how have you tackled frontline ownership and empowerment?
So I think you nailed it, Paul. I think that, the operators don't want another process. They don't want another button to click just to do it. They want to feel value added. And more importantly, they have a job to do, and they're going to have to do that job no matter what else we put on top of them. And that primary job is to get product to the customer. So like you said, to make it as simple and easy as possible was one of our main goals. And the way that we did that was operator engagement. Instead of taking the traditional top-down approach and saying, as managers, we know what's wrong and we're going to put these categories in, we went to the source and to the experts and said, you tell us, what button do you want there? What issues do you face day to day? Let us speak your language so that we can help you. And one of the big benefits that we saw was this picture above, that's actually a supervisor's desk. It's a little hidden behind the cabinets, but we went and put up a very large TV monitor with Raven live at all times broadcasted there. That way, the supervisor's aware at all times of what's going on. Management can quickly walk by and understand, but more importantly, the operators know. They can see where they're at, how they're doing, how the person next to them is doing, how they're doing total as a group, and really just putting it out there that this isn't a report. This is live. This is a tool for us to engage and to help you, so that anytime we see that color change, management's going to show up, and it's going to be support, right? Because traditionally, we would have all of these paper records that we would review the next day or at end of shift. That time is already gone, right? We can't make an impact. We can learn and we can maneuver, but we've already lost that time and that production and that capacity, right? So by having this there, we're able to quickly and in real time go support the operator with their issues, which just further empowered them. It brought them on board, and it really gained their trust. And overall, it helped our company.
That's fantastic, Mike. And I think I had one question for you as well, because earlier I think you shared, the workstation where you have the clipboard and you have the big whiteboard as well. And a thought just came to my mind as well, were there any issues in that type of tracking as it relates, because it's handwritten, right? So how accurate did you trust the data before? Because I don't know, there's some interpretation depending on what comments someone wrote, right?
Absolutely correct. And that's a very good point. At our facility, English isn't our primary language. We have a predominantly Vietnamese workforce, followed by a predominantly Hispanic workforce. So not only do you have multiple languages, but even within those languages, people weren't using the same terminology. They might not even necessarily be very literate in their own language. So it was a lot of just trying to commonize and understand what they were trying to tell us. So by going to this digital format, it became a lot easier for us to all understand, because we all started speaking the same language, and it really reduced the errors and the time that it took us to go get this information and understand what it meant.
I guess that's another challenge of sort of only partially going from manual to digital. So the spreadsheet element is when people are writing something on a whiteboard or something, different people will use different terminologies. And so, the same downtime reason may have like 10 different flavors, particularly if there's language differences as well. And when you put that into a spreadsheet, if you just type it down verbatim or sort of capture it, then what you're doing then is, okay, you've captured it digitally, but there's little you can do about it, because now you've got to figure out how to collate the same downtimes that are called different things by different people, with spelling mistakes and all sorts of things. So I guess standardization has been pretty important through the whole process.
Absolutely correct. I mean, we're talking continuous improvement, right? So waste is our enemy, and we were building waste into our system by default. So by commonizing it, we removed the waste and made fast improvements.
That's fantastic. And I'm fixated, my eyes are fixated on the big dashboard, and I'm interested to just hear a little bit of insights of the before and after of having the dashboard visibility. Was there any change from a cultural perspective? Because as we're talking about ownership, right? Was there any impact made by just making the data available as well to their shop floor colleagues?
Absolutely. The first thing that we saw was the numbers went up, right? I mean, people know that it's on display, they're being watched, and it doesn't matter where you're from or what language you speak. You don't want to be the one in red on the board when nobody else is. That doesn't feel good, and the boss is coming. So that would be the first thing. And then after that, what we saw was really interesting was we had a lot of operators who had been there for a long time that were very good at their job, but they came to work, they did their job, and they left. Suddenly, these individuals were approaching management, team leads, supervisors, and began engaging, having conversations, and talking about goals and KPIs that maybe they weren't aware of. It had never been discussed. So it really started a lot of dialogue that made it, very, very valuable to us to make improvements.
So that's interesting. So you've got the operator engagement and the sort of the empowerment. But now that you've actually got, it's like a closed loop system now that they're generating data that's valuable for the supervisors and the management, it's creating that conversation. Whereas if it was maybe just posted on a whiteboard and ended up on a spreadsheet, it might sort of just get lost in with the other things that are going on the day. But with it being there sort of prominent and in front of everybody and people looking at it, I assume also sort of comes into standard daily work, that now you get those dialogues coming in between sort of supervisors and operators, because it is part of the culture now.
Absolutely correct. And one other very, very interesting thing that we didn't anticipate was friendly competition. Without us putting it in place, not only within this PSA operator to operator, but our facility as a whole, supervisors began competing and saying, hey, look at the board, look what I've got. What are you doing? Do you need some help? And that just brought us all up to the next level.
And there's something to that competition, like you said, right? It's the friendly competitiveness, but it's a sign, or for me at least, that it's a reflection that the people are enjoying what they're doing as well, right? So having that visibility of the data and being allowed to even action it in real time, it's not an afterthought. I think there's really something there as well. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
And it really ties into the notion as well, because here at Raven, we're hyper focused on creating an exceptional operator experience. I think for me, like one of my joys is I hear it from you as well. We're working with their ops team and from a lot of our other customers in terms of that, user interface. And as Paul mentioned, it's really about removing that burden. So we're generating highly granular and accurate timelines. And this is the route to garnering trust, engagement, and ultimately the successful digital transformation on the factory floor. So we'll move into our fourth theme, which is reactive to proactive continuous improvement. And I think from my experiences, this has really, really been a tough one to kind of move from that reactive. And I think, Mike, you also kind of talked, we share the same experiences of my shop floor days where we collected data, we reviewed it every 24 hours in some instances. And again, when you're trying to be proactive, it's difficult. People have forgotten what happened. What were the issues that happened, right? So it becomes a learning activity versus fixing issues as they come in real time. And then when I fast forward to now, I can confidently, Paul spoke about that secret sauce, right? Share the recipe for success with my customers. The initial stages of transformation really need to focus on improving the response to downtime, right? So it's enabling those operators and the supervisors to action that process context as it's coming in so they can make the right choices. In one of their manufacturing sites I used to work with, it's in that ability of that real time, we would have products coming off the line. Maintenance is taking forever to come. So it's like, and it was the food industry. So you have all the products that's just going on the floor, and it's such a slow reaction time by the time you walk upstream, so you can shut things off, right? And then unfortunately, it's the waste is being created. So when I think about the product that we have and how we're dealing with it, just enabling those monitors, as you said, right? You can quickly just have that visual of downstream, something's wrong, and react immediately to stop that production from happening. So once we contextualize that data, enable that visibility through dashboards, as you shared, Mike, add in alerts as an example, right? This is where we can be able to start to do this proactive response to it. So I'm curious as well to seeing how you guys have been handling some of that, or what's been that secret sauce or recipe for DuraVent as well to shift from their reactive to proactive.
Sure. So it was really interesting. There was multiple phases. So, initially when we kicked it off, pre-Raven, due to system limitations, our MRP, all of these systems had limitations as far as when we could collect the data, right? They cycled one time a day. It was at midnight when nobody's here. So you basically had your hands tied and you had to come in the morning and reflect on what happened the day before. So some data is better than no data, but we knew that we needed to do better. So that's where we came up with the hour by hour boards. But even then, we're talking about the span of an hour. And the requirement was that the board was filled out on the hour, which means it's the end of the hour and you've already had an hour. So all of those issues have now escaped. It's better than a day, but we were still at an hour. Once we began working with Raven and we were able to get the real-time data with the call outs, we began being able to react within minutes or even seconds. And that to some industries doesn't sound like a big deal, but at DuraVent, we have takt times and cycle times on some product that are 10 to 15 seconds. Every 10 to 15 seconds, a part's coming out, going in the box, getting ready to ship out. So, when you start talking hours and even minutes, it really matters to us. So having that ability to say, hey, I have an issue and I need you here within 1 minute, because even that's going to impact 10 to 6 parts, that absolutely changed everything for us. So things such as our machine downtime decreased dramatically, our output increased. And again, going back to people being the most important asset, is it really, really changed the relationship we had with our operators. We were no longer coming to them asking them to recollect, 24 hours ago, random issues that they had. And they have a lot of issues throughout the day, right? I mean, they have a very, very dynamic job out on the shop floor. It's constantly changing. So we were able to quickly and proactively go see what the issue was, maneuver accordingly before we lost minutes, hours, and even days.
That's fantastic. And quick question for you, because you talked a little bit about the alerts as well in terms of that responsiveness. Are there any other attributes or features that you guys are using in terms of because you mentioned 15 seconds, you have parts coming off, right? How are you guys gauging to make sure you're getting to those outputs, right, at the end of the day?
Right. So yeah, some of the other really, really good features that Raven was able to supply us was even if the operator doesn't prompt us, by design, we know if we're ahead or behind. So I can look up at my screen and see every single machine that Raven's tied to. I can see what the standard and what the expected rate is and where I'm currently at. And whether I'm ahead, I'm behind, or just there in the nick of time. So that was absolutely valuable to us. And not only on my screen here in the office, because I'm just an office guy, right? I don't make the magic. Our supervisors and our team leads are able to see the same information, not only on their computer, but on the Hublet device as well. It's changing color, alerting us that, hey, we have an issue, or even something as simple as a changeover. We know we don't have to go interrupt and slow down production. We're able to use visual cues and visual management.
It's probably aided that healthy competition as well, having the head and behind module.
Oh yes, and yeah, the supervisors started asking for each other's visibility as well.
That's fantastic. And Paul, I'm curious to also kind of hear in terms of like your thoughts when it comes to the approaches for moving from reactive to proactive.
Yeah, so I thought Mike's explanation sort of nailed it, and I was thinking about this theme, and I thought, so when a critical machine goes down for a prolonged period due to mechanical or electrical failure, that's a highly visible event, and it gets lots of attention, and it's prioritized. And there's all sorts of techniques, preventative maintenance, predictive maintenance, even there's tools and processes that you can implement in order to try and go from a reactive to a proactive regime. However, continuous improvement isn't just about reducing or eliminating those major downtimes. And in aggregate, the smaller stoppages, microstops, etc., can accumulate to bigger losses than those highly visible ones. So I was thinking about this theme and I thought reactive and proactive, actually, one other thing is from actually no action to proaction for those hidden losses. At Raven, we talk a lot about hidden losses. That's not reactive, they just don't get addressed. They're just ignored effectively because, they're seen as trivial at the time. But, and also shining a light on those hidden losses isn't easy. So as I mentioned earlier, getting operators to diligently label minor stops. I mean, yeah, they can do the big stops, but those minor stops, it's difficult because they can often, in the moment, rank them as trivial. However, with automation and operator-assisted downtime tagging, accurate and granular labeling of those minor and micro stops is possible. And companies out there achieving 99 to 100% labeling of downtime, they're able to now differentiate between whether it's a mechanical downtime, an electrical, organizational, or some scenario-dependent instability. And from that, they're able to deduce actionable insights that can drive continuous improvement that without shining that light, they probably wouldn't have even bothered. So I just wanted to sort of switch the theme a little bit because I thought Mike nailed it with reactive to proactive, but there's another hidden benefit there or a potential benefit there, which is from no action to proaction.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of just listening to both of your points as well, it's triggering quite a bit because it's really about how you address those systemic inefficiencies to further enhance that go up or EE maturity, right, as you speak, which is really interesting. And Mike, I go back to that competitive, friendly competition as well, because often, we talk about standardization as being a key enabler to improvement for your OEE as an example, but standardization is difficult when people don't have the why or the buy-in. So I love the idea of having the dashboards there. The supervisors are asking to see other people's ahead and behind. So that encouragement, you start to question, if I was an operator, what are they doing better than me? So that, and then you keep getting better from that, right? So It really does start to address those systemic inefficiencies within the process, and then the improvement comes naturally as well.
Absolutely. And Brenda, if we had one more moment, I just wanted to touch on one other thing that Raven really opened our eyes and helped us in regards to being proactive was reporting that we get from Raven really became valuable. And one specific instance was one of the reports that Raven provides us is changeover data, how we're doing on changeover, where there's room for improvement. And it really shocked me because we weren't aware that our three most common items that we run were having changeover issues, and we were scheduling them back to back, which was acquiring vast losses during that day. And until the data was put in front of us by Raven, we didn't see it because we're here every day and we didn't have the fresh eyes. It was just business as usual. So once we got that information, we changed our pattern of production so that these items were no longer scheduled close together to help mitigate those losses. And we saw, vast improvements in our output, our efficiency, and our utilization. And on top of that, now we knew, hey, these three items are our biggest losses. Let's go tackle these. Let's go do a changeover reduction. Let's do a SMED event. So that was beyond, I can't even tell you how big of an improvement that was for us.
That's fantastic to hear, Mike. Like Paul's saying, right? Shine the light on the problem and use the data because that's your source of truth right there.
Yeah, we weren't even reacting to it. That was one of those losses. I don't want to call it a micro because it wasn't. It was
even a micro.
Yeah, but we didn't have visibility. So
that's fantastic. So I'm being a timekeeper at the same time. I do want to make sure that we can be able to jump into our Q&A section. So I'll ask Marisha and Lindsay if there's any questions. And while we're doing that quick sanity check, we did want to ask all the audience members as well, if there's an opportunity, if you're interested in a one-on-one demo of what Raven does, again, please do let us know through the poll section, and then we'll have the team reach out to you guys and arrange the one-on-one demo. So I'll give you guys a few moments while I go through the questions. And again, I'll just remind everyone, if you do want to participate in the Q&A, you can type in the Q&A box that's available on the menu at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So I'll start off with some of the simple ones. There is one question: can Raven be added to our current system setup? So I'll take a stab, although full disclosure, I would offer this up to my solutions team and the operations team, because they are the more technical expertise when it comes to this. But the overall answer is absolutely. Like at Raven, our approach there is really to be the best of the breed approach. So whether these different systems that already are up and running within the facilities as well, this is where we can partner up just to understand how we can do some of those integrations as well. So that is certainly something that can be arranged. And if someone did seeds that question as well, I will highly recommend that you set up a demo as well, so we can be able to see all the different capabilities.
Yeah, it's very important that we do that, because this is not an easy problem to solve. If it was, it would be in every MES and OEE system, and it's not. And to solve this, you have to go narrow and deep. Okay, a lot of sort of OEE systems and MES systems, they go broad and shallow. So being able to sort of bolt on to existing systems is you know, and be a best of breed technology within an ecosystem, I think makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that's something we definitely do.
Mm-hmm. And there's a question from Scott Phillips, and the question is: did DuraVent integrate Raven with an ERP or MES system?
The long answer is no, we did not, but that was not due to Raven's capabilities. That was due to us changing systems at the same time that Raven came on board, and changing systems a second time when we just did this acquisition. So we decided we just wanted to wait and let the dust settle before we took on that challenge, but we plan to, and discussions and plans have already began for that.
Okay. Next question, how long does it typically take to see improvement in production when moving to a digital solution like Raven? So Mike, being on the end user here, is maybe you can share some of your experiences just in terms of since Raven. I think you mentioned it's been over a year. So how long was that journey in terms of specific for DuraVent?
Sure. So it was progressive. Initially, there wasn't a lot of changes, but that was due to management needing to get the buy-in from the team, right? So, you know, step one was to implement, involve them, but tell them very firmly, we need you to follow this process so that we can gather this data, et cetera. And what really changed the tide is when they saw us reacting and using that information. So to be honest, we took a little longer than that than we should have. So really, I'd say it depends on your ability and skills to prove that this isn't just another process, this isn't another box, this isn't the flavor of the month. Once you get the buy-in and people see that this isn't just data that's going to be put on the wall, this is real-time information that's used to help them, that's when we saw the big results. So it was about 6 months for us before we saw large gains, and by large, I mean excess of 5 to 6% output and utilization and efficiency.
Okay, fantastic. And Scott has another question. Did DuraVent evaluate other software options besides Raven, and did you have an evaluation process?
We did multiple evaluations. We actually did have another system in place before Raven, but Raven proved themselves and was able to run them out of our building. And you know, of course, we've had multiple others come, you know, attempt to get it on board. And as we've had changes in senior management and executive management, they've brought some of their previous relationships with them, but nobody's been able to take the place of Raven thus far.
Okay, fantastic. I will jump into the chat to see if there's any. There's one: we aren't ready to entirely move from whiteboards and pen and paper on our shop floor. What options do we have? How do we get started in moving towards automation?
Well, really what we did was, again, a tiered approach. And we started with one unit from Raven and simply deployed it and wanted to understand, was the data reliable? How do people interact with it, etc. So I would say, baby steps, right? Start with the demo, understand its capabilities versus your expectations. And one thing that we saw was everybody now has iPhones. Everybody's used to fast clicks. And when they saw somebody not having to walk over and do a whiteboard, they said, hey, what do I have to do to put a screen in front of me to press the button? And then it spread like wildfire.
Very interesting. Paul, any thoughts and advice as well for this question? Because you do have quite a few of experiences as well that you've seen across our different customers.
So it's not like we are creating a digital whiteboard here. So we're not replacing, I mean, what we're saying here is you no longer need the whiteboard. But if you want to keep the whiteboard and keep doing it like that, you can do it in sort of parallel to Raven. As you saw on my screen, the Raven interface is right next to the operator, and they've got the digitization there. If they still want to do some sort of manual stuff on a whiteboard, that can go hand in hand. Because we fully understand that a lot of people are passionate about, particularly around lean and sort of continuous improvement, that there's benefit in using a whiteboard from a sort of a change management and a cultural perspective. So it's not that Raven is going to displace that necessarily. It's just that the data, you will have much richer data to support those discussions around the whiteboard.
Mm-hmm. And there's another question from Ahmed, and the question is, did you encounter any issues with worker unions? And I guess it's more, and I can answer that from a labor union perspective as well, because we do have here at Raven a number of our customers that have unionized manufacturing sites. And surprisingly, I've worked with unions as well, and it's always tough to get that buy-in, but with all the deployments that we've done in those, they've become the biggest advocates, because it goes back to what Paul mentioned, right? And even equally with Mike, that operators and supervisors, they don't want extra work. They want tools that enable them to be able to operate efficiently. So that's been the biggest driver. And we also help the manufacturers with getting that buy-in as well. So like I said, once they see it up and going, it's pretty quick to see a lot of the unionized labor force as well quickly get on board with the system.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that operator engagement piece is one of the key elements of I guess addressing that. That some of the concerns are, I guess that the reason for the question is, is this system monitoring performance of an operator, which in some segments of manufacturing can be potentially problematic, but that operator engagement being so high, it's actually endorsed by the unions.
Mm-hmm. And we have, we'll try to squeeze in this question. I'm not sure if I missed this or not, but Mike, did you mention how much downtime DuraVent has been able to tag? So I think this is asking in relation to the context.
I do not have that information in front of me. I didn't touch on that. My gut and instinctually, I want to say it was about a 10% reduction initially in machine downtime. As we progressed and gotten better, I actually just did an analysis on this a few months ago. In total, we're at about a 40% reduction.
That's fantastic. And I think in terms of the context as well, like DuraVent, the operator context, they do have a 100% contextualized timeline, which means the operators are accounting for every second really of their production time, which is really nice to see that engagement.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, I will see if we can squeeze in one last question before we get to time here. What technologies exist for data capture on complex shop floors, such as structural steel manufacturing?
I'm sorry.
The question was, what technologies exist for data capture on complex shop floors, such as structural steel manufacturing? And I think from my perspective, I'll benchmark across all our customer base as well, because this is one of the fun things that we get to do at Raven is we do try to make sure that what we're deploying actually fits the right manufacturing environment. So we have various manufacturing segmentations, right? So, and I'm not sure if the question was a little bit more detailed, but how I am reading it is almost asking whether the application suits structural steel manufacturing. This is something as part of that onboarding journey, or even through that demo request, we do that requirements gathering to make sure that we are able to actually configure the system to meet the manufacturing segments requirements as well. So that's certainly something that's applicable with Raven.
Yeah, I would say that for discrete type manufacturing, for sort of doing the sort of functionality that Raven does, you really you can have just a sensor that looks at sort of a unit being produced, so just a sensor eye that's then sort of cabled into you know, an IO link device that then sort of gets into the system. It's not a complicated setup. It's very quick to set it up. However, you know, if you've got a sort of a complex continuous steel manufacturing process, you know, you've got a distributed control system or PLCs that are banked into some sort of IoT connectivity, sort of like Kepware as an example, then again, Raven can just look straight into that as well.
Yeah,
And
fantastic.
although we're not structural, DuraVent is a steel manufacturing facility, and we've had no issues. As Paul said, they've been able to integrate into every single type of PLC machine system that we have. And we've also asked them to do a couple of custom projects where they didn't tie in the machine. They manually customize push buttons and things of that nature for us. So I'm very confident they'd be able to suit your needs.
Okay, and I think another question really similar to the previous one. Legacy packaging machinery in CPG has neither hardware hooks nor software network state communications, such as PackML. Please describe recommended ways to get the data flowing. And I think, Paul, you touched on this in your last comment as well, because it really goes, we have customers as well where it's old legacy equipment. We can tap into the stack lights to get all the signals that we need to be able to get the right count sizes. So it's really going to be about how we hear about the details of the installation. And we have an amazing solutions team as well that will quickly find a solution for everyone. Okay, and we'll give it another minute. I think we are almost at time and I don't see any other questions flowing in. So I will wrap it up, but firstly, I would like to, oh, there's one that just came in. With your management being from automotive industry, did you find your PLCs and control systems were similar to those of automotive manufacturers?
Yes.
Succinct.
Believe it or not, imagine it or not, but suddenly a lot of our PLC systems were changed to individuals and to companies they previously had dealt with, believe it or not.
And with that, I think that wraps up all our questions. We've been able to answer all of them, which is good and in good time. So I do want to take the opportunity on behalf of Paul and myself, Mike, to thank you for making the time to share with all of us all the insights from DuraVent and all the amazing work that you're working with the teams there. It's really fantastic news to share. So thank you, Paul, as well for your time. And thank you to the audience as well for attending. So again, the session was recorded. We'll definitely be sending a copy out and a link where everybody can be able to review this later. And then if there's still any questions or any demo, please do get in touch with us. On the screen here are the various methods to get in touch with anyone at Raven.